Hello everyone and welcome back for the last session of the Competitive Europe Summit. My name is Thibault Larger. I'm a reporter for Politico Europe and I cover industrial policy and competition policy. This last session will be about Europe competitiveness in the light of the coronavirus crisis. But before we start, do not forget to submit your question via the Politico Events app. For the participant who just joined now, don't worry, it's easy. Open the app, go to the item program and click on the relevant session. In our case, it's closing interview. Then click on the tab video feed and you'll be able to ask questions. Easy. We also encourage you to tweet using our hashtag Politico Competition. Vladis Dombrovskis has just joined me in the studio. Good afternoon, Mr.
Good afternoon.
Dombrovskis. You are Executive Vice President at the European Commission, and you are in charge of building an economy that works for people. You have been coordinating the Commission economic response to coronavirus crisis and co-leading the EU industrial strategy. So, to start, maybe we could go back a few months back, and in March, you presented a very ambitious program, the industrial strategy for Europe, aiming at embracing Europe's digital transformation and also making sure that we are building a green economy for the future. My first question to you today will be, how did the crisis change your plans, and is there a chance that the recovery will enter the twin transition?
Well, first of all, thank you for this invitation. As regards crisis effects on the economy and on the plans concerning Europe's economic policy, of course, one can say that crisis has changed the plans. During the last couple of months, we had to concentrate on immediate crisis response, fiscal response, temporary state aid framework, adjustments to the prudential rules for the financial sector. We had been preparing the European Economy Recovery Plan, Next Generation EU, a package worth 750 billion euros. So clearly it has been a very busy time, and clearly we'll have to take the lessons from this crisis into account when developing further policies. But at the same time, it's worth noting that our aims of green and digital transformations of the economy remain very much in place. We had set an ambitious target for Europe for climate neutrality by 2050. We stick with this target. We currently are exploring whether we can be more ambitious as regards our 2030 Paris targets. And also the industrial strategy, SME strategy, which we presented indeed just before COVID crisis, remains valid. Many of the elements, I would say, are now even more urgent. And strengthening Europe's industrial base, strengthening Europe's competitiveness, supporting our small and medium enterprises. I think those will be also very important topics when we now will be recovering from the crisis. And what we want to ensure is, in a sense, that we are not just coming back to the pre-crisis status quo, but indeed that we use this massive fiscal stimulus, also one can say monetary stimulus, which is available to facilitate the green and digital transformations, so to invest in future technologies, not in past technologies.
So you're telling me that you earmarked 750 billion euros to help with the recovery. The EU member states have already, I think, paid more than 2.3 trillion euros to help their economies during the crisis now. You also, I think, estimated the Commission that moving toward green economy would cost 260 billion euros a year up to 2030. So how will we pay for that? Are EU countries strong enough to invest, to borrow market on the financial market, or do you expect the private sector to chip in also?
Well, definitely we expect also strong participation from the private sector. In fact, it will be private sector which will be able to provide the necessary scale of investment to reach our climate change targets. But it must be said, when we proposed European Economic Recovery Plan, this Next Generation EU, we proposed it on top of the multi-annual financial framework, which is also being discussed, and which is amounts currently discussed are around 1.1 trillion euros. So all in all, it means financial firepower for next 7 years of 1.85 trillion euros. And already in the multi-annual financial framework, which we now are calling core MFF, we have earmarked or mainstreamed, rather, it's a better word, 25% of all EU budgetary spending of the whole MFF for goals linked with our climate and environmental goals. So there's a 25% mainstreaming target which is already there, and we apply the same target also for this additional top-up of Next Generation EU. So that's one answer to the question on available financing. Already before the crisis, we came forward with a proposal on European Green Deal investment plan, aiming to mobilize 1 trillion euros over the next decade. This plan also remains in place. As part of Next Generation EU, our crisis response, we substantially increase amounts of just transition mechanism to support member states in their transition to climate neutrality. So we are doing what we can from the public policy point of view, but indeed only public funding will not be enough. So that's where private funding comes in, and that's where our work streams on sustainable finance come in, and also on the next plan for the Capital Markets Union.
So I have a question on the incentive. So your colleague Mauro Petriccione this morning said that the private sector probably had the capacity to invest such amount of money, but maybe the incentive would not be there. So you told me that there were a number of initiatives going in that direction in the pipelines. But I have an example that I would like to hear you on. One of the priorities of the German presidency is to speed up the rollout of 5G in Europe, to develop the market for connected cars. And there's a feeling in the telecoms industry that the companies have been very reluctant in investing in 5G. They say, we've invested in 4G, we've struggled to roll out super fast broadband across the EU, and because of the crisis, now it's very much complicated. So we can see that they may tell you, oh, but we don't want to invest that much money. It's not profitable for us. So how will you do to push this company? Are you ready to set targets and find companies that do not reach the climate goals or the investment targets? Or what will you do?
Well, in this case, there are, I would say, several parts to this response. First, on targets. Well, we are not setting private investment targets to companies. Of course, it's companies which, at the end of the day, take their investment decisions. But we create the right framework. That's where the sustainable finance comes in. So our EU classification system on sustainable economic activities, the regulation comes into force on 12th of July. So just in a few days. And we are now seeing as a matter of priority to actually come out with the first actual taxonomies on climate mitigation and climate adaptation by the end of the year. So this will provide clear guidance to the investors. So what is seen consistent with our Green Deal goals, what is not seen consistent, and it will provide a basis for also many other work streams like European Green Bond standards, EU eco-label, especially for retail financial products, initiatives like green mortgages. So it will provide much more clarity for investors which want to invest in green economy. We will also reassess the non-financial reporting, so amendments to the non-financial reporting directive to also streamline the information which companies are providing to public, to potential investors. But also we are setting goals, but those are more like goals of emission reduction. So they are goals in terms of energy efficiency of buildings. There are goals as share of renewable energies. There are emission targets for cars and trucks, and so on and so forth. And also these goals, of course, will drive lots of private investment because companies will need to invest to actually meet those targets.
But will the goals be binding? Will you be ready to hit with your super hammer companies that do not reach the goals?
Well, the goals are binding. For example, if we talk, just to use an example of emission targets for cars and trucks, so clearly those are binding goals, and cars which are not meeting emission targets will not be admitted to the market. So clearly, from that point of view, goals are binding.
But did you, I think recently you changed the regulation on emission, how to count the emissions, so it is a little bit easier for the cars. Aren't you afraid that there will be some pushback from some industries to soften the goals and to make sure that they get away with not complying with the direction you're setting?
Well, first of all, a number of goals are set, and if we are currently discussing the possibly even deeper cuts in emissions concerning our 2030 targets. So there probably will not be too much scope for, so to say, loosening the different climate goals and standards. If anything, probably we need more strict targets. But of course, there's also need to protect our industry, and there are 2 points which I would highlight. First, that's why there's also strong support programs through, I already mentioned, European Green Deal investment plan, but more generally through our Invest EU programs. And we are also looking at issues concerning the carbon leakage. So one of the mechanisms which is currently in preparation is so-called carbon border adjustment mechanism. So if we set stricter targets for European companies, of course we cannot allow goods in which are produced based on looser targets, or otherwise we undermine our own industry. So there will need to be adjustment. And currently it's being dealt with by so to say, free allowances of emissions to energy-intensive companies. So we intend to phase out those free allowances and instead to move to this carbon border adjustment.
So on the carbon adjustment mechanism, it seems, if I followed the discussion well enough, that the Commission is leaning toward a solution, mechanism under the blocks emission trading system, and especially targeting the steel and the cement industry. And I have one question for you. Will it be sufficient to level the playing field and to make sure that there's no unfair competition from countries who do not share the same environmental standards? Aren't you afraid that just focusing on steel and cement may have ripple effects on other products that the EU exporting and then hamper EU's competitiveness abroad. I'm thinking about car. There's a lot of steel in car. So is it the right industry? Shouldn't you cover all the industries and not just steel and cement?
First of all, we need to roll out this mechanism, and probably will not be able to roll it out across all possible industries at the same time, because also the calculations on necessary amount of adjustment will be very complex and very technical. So that's why we're proposing that we are gradually rolling out this policy, and indeed steel and cement are the first candidates, and that will be linked then also with phasing out free emission allowances to those industries. So instead of having those free emission allowances, which in a sense also helps to address carbon leakage. But if we want to move to the carbon neutrality, this approach is not sustainable. So we need to phase them out, and then we need to set this carbon border adjustment mechanism. So that's a basic idea, but of course we'll have to monitor the implications and adjust the system accordingly. So potentially, clearly it can be broader than this, and we need to see the competitiveness of European companies very carefully, so to say that they are not undercut by companies from other countries with lower environmental standards.
So you think there's a problem for EU exports with your solution? Is that what you're saying?
No, the point is exactly that with carbon border adjustment mechanism we can level the playing field.
And I heard in the discussion that there was another solution, consumption tax, that like a VAT tax, everyone would have to pay, but if you would export products, you wouldn't have to pay it. Why didn't you choose that one? Because from an economic perspective, this is a little bit more efficient than trying to calculate exactly the amount and trying not to distort too much competition abroad with exports and so on and so forth. Why wasn't it a proper solution?
Well, I'm afraid I've really not quite followed your question, but we already do have a value-added tax which operates in exactly this way, that value-added tax is not applied to goods and services which are being exported.
No, but using this system to impose a carbon adjustment mechanism and not do it under the ETS system, is that a solution you considered, and why did you discard it?
First of all, this carbon border adjustment mechanism is still a work in progress. But as you understand, a value-added tax, by definition, focuses on value added of the given product or given cycle. So it's not always linked with emissions and environmental targets. So there is not a direct match. But I would say this is, as I said, still work in progress. And of course, there is still possibility for stakeholders, including industry representatives, also civil society organizations, to provide their input to this work.
Maybe I can ask you a series of 4 very quick questions, because you mentioned twice already the work that you're doing on sustainable finance. So I would like to test how far you would be able to go to make sure that the funds, investments are going in the right direction and toward the greening of the EU economy. So 4 questions. You can only answer by yes or no. You have 1 joker. And let's start. So should investors and credit institutions estimate and disclose which temperature scenario their portfolios are financing?
You know,
Yes or no?
the answer is more yes than no,
Okay.
but it's more complex. You know, when we are looking, for example, at low carbon benchmarks, they are clearly linked at different scenarios in terms of climate change, and Paris-aligned benchmark is the one which is aligned then with the Paris climate change goals. But it's more complex because requirements also differ to large listed companies, to SMEs, and so on and so forth.
Okay, so the idea is good, but
Yeah.
we need to, the devil is in the detail, I understand. Should biodiversity take a more prominent role in EU's sustainable finance agenda?
Well, it is part of EU sustainable finance agenda. If you look at the 6 environmental criteria which we had set, one of them is biodiversity.
But should it be strengthened?
Well, it's currently one of 6 criteria. There are also other criteria which are also relevant.
Should accounting rules for provision incorporate recycling costs?
Once again, there are different ways you can address it. You can address it in this way. You can address it through some recycling systems and contributions of companies to those recycling systems. So once again, there are several ways to deal with this problem.
So why not? But
there are also other ways.
Fine. Last one, that's the tricky one. Should accounting rules for calculating impairments suppose that in 2050 there will be no more natural gas or oil? So the idea behind that would be to push forward the date where these assets or assets based on this technology would be stranded, and then push investors to invest in other technologies. Would you do that?
Well,
you can take a joker, but
what is a joker? Sorry, I don't quite get.
You don't have to answer.
No, I can answer. Maybe I take a joker that I answer not with yes or no, but a bit longer, if I may. Yeah, because indeed, if you look at our climate neutrality target by 2050, we normally should be phasing out fossil fuels. But at the same time, for example, on natural gas, we look at natural gas currently as a transition activity, not in a sense that it's a transition activity which will go beyond 2050, but often right now, if you need to move, say, away from coal, the quickest and cheapest way is to move to the natural gas. So we see that natural gas will be part of the picture as, for example, Paris goals. It may not be, and there are also certain criteria, certain emission criteria under which it falls as this transition category, but it probably will not be part of the picture by 2050. And of course, it's then I would say to be determined how exactly it's dealt with in accounting rules, and whether indeed those impairments should kind of assume, so to say, those assets becoming stranded assets by 2050. By the way, that was one of the reasons why European Investment Bank phased out quite rapidly investments in fossil fuels, including natural gas, exactly this risk of stranded assets. What European Investment Bank was saying, that if we now lend to those projects, which we know that in a few decades will become obsolete projects, we are taking ourselves also additional financial risks. So this was one of the arguments why EIB phased out fossil fuels so rapidly.
We have one question from the audience, so let me read. Do you have a plan B for Europe's recovery in case not all national parliaments approve EU borrowing for the recovery fund?
On this, I think we need to concentrate not on plans B, but on plan A. And I would say discussions show that all EU member states recognize that we are in an unprecedented crisis as European Union, and that we need to react together and in a spirit of European solidarity. Of course, devil will be in detail. We are expecting difficult negotiations, but at the end of the day, we must reach agreement.
So in July, there will be a that's your intention, there will be an agreement.
Of course, ideally it's July. You know, I would not now start pinpointing exact dates, but there must be an agreement, and I would say sooner rather than later, because this multi-annual financial framework expires already at the end of this year.
And what would be the variable on which you would be happy to change your position or your proposal so everyone agrees to jump in the boat?
Well, first of all, a Commission now has put out the proposal. Already in 2018, we had put out the proposal on multi-annual financial framework. Discussions in subsequent years brought a number of corrections to this Commission's proposal, and the latest negotiating boxes discussed in the Council, of course, deviate on a number of elements from Commission's proposal. Same is possible with this recovery plan, Next Generation EU. I think for us, what is important that we maintain the ambition and we maintain the main elements and main goals of the Commission's proposal.
I have a question about one of the proposals from 2 weeks ago. So you said earlier that Europe needs money, we need investors to participate to the transition. Money from European investors, money from investors from elsewhere. 2 weeks ago, you proposed superpowers aiming at cracking down unfair subsidies. And I've listened to, I've heard from the industry that non-EU companies are worried because it would be more legal uncertainty, and they say that it could have an impact on foreign direct investment flowing to Europe. It could reduce them. Think about the Trump tax break, for instance. Almost all companies benefited from it. That could trigger an investigation in Europe. So how will you prevent this from happening?
Well, first of all, when we discuss foreign direct investment, first of all, it must be said that Europe remains open to foreign direct investment. We welcome foreign investors, and many European jobs, there are estimates that like 16 million European jobs actually depend on foreign direct investment. So, but at the same time, as we are ensuring a level playing field with our state aid and competition rules within the single market among EU countries. Of course, now we have temporary state aid framework, which allows for more flexibility, but that's, as the name suggests, it's temporary and it's a response to unprecedented crisis. But normally we have strict state aid rules. But then if we want to ensure a level playing field within single market, we also must make sure that then third country companies are not distorting this level playing field by receiving subsidies or other state support from third countries. So that's a basic idea to ensure a continued level playing field. Well, your question on taxation, well, normally also within EU we allow for different direct taxation rates, including corporate income tax rate. So having this or that corporate income tax rate is not seen by the EU automatically as a subsidy.
It has been in some cases.
No,
there were some
there had been some state aid cases which were concerning selective benefits which certain companies were receiving in the form of tax rulings, or certain tax structures which were available to non-resident companies to compare with resident companies in the same country. So without mentioning specific countries, in no case we were questioning the basic corporate income tax rate, but we were questioning if there were selective benefits given to companies or tax structures which were benefiting non-resident companies vis-a-vis resident companies.
But to come back to my question, you don't think that this could prevent or reduce the amount of foreign investment in Europe?
Of course, we also must see when we discuss foreign direct investment that how this is playing out strategically. That yes, we are open to foreign investment, but we also should not be naive. For example, now we are in a crisis. Valuations of European companies may be down as a result of the crisis. Do we are now allowed to buy up our strategic industries with the help of foreign subsidies? This, I think, requires some second thought, and that's where our white paper on foreign subsidies comes in.
I'm conscious about the time now, so I think it's time to wrap up. Thanks a lot for all your answers. So what I take away from this conversation is that, of course, the coronavirus crisis is a challenge, but it's also an opportunity to move toward greener economy and a more digital EU economy. We will need money, a lot of money, and this may also and the initiative that the European Commission is taking may have an impact on cost structure of the companies. But you also have projects in the pipelines to make sure that there's a level playing field between businesses in Europe and businesses elsewhere who do not abide by the same standards. Now I think it will be the end of the summit. So I hope you were able to watch some of the sessions and also connect with other e-attendees via the app. Again, we would like to thank our presenting partner CIFIC and EN Plus Group and knowledge partner McKinsey for making this event possible. But don't forget, we're not living forever. There are several virtual events coming up before the summer recess, including a virtual panel discussion on the future of sustainable packaging on July 6th at 4:30 Brussels time. And you will also have the opportunity to test again your knowledge soon, because we are back with 2 quizzes, the EU edition on July 7 at 5 p.m. Brussels time, and a UK edition on July 8 at 5:30 London time. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Mr. Dombrovskis.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.